Hi, my name is Shabana Sparks, and this is my story of international adoption. Some are given to brothels, some are born into such a bad home that they end up being put on the streets, some end up in trash cans, others are sold as temple prostitutes, and orphanages are not really an option. That is India, where the vast majority of children given up are women. Because they are female in this culture, they are of no value. My story is a little different. My birth mother chose to give me to an orphanage. She was 27, which in Indian culture is very old to be single and to be pregnant outside of marriage. Regardless of how she got there, what we do know is that circumstances were unavoidable and she ended up pregnant. So whether by word of mouth or just by sheer desperation, she ended up going to an orphanage that just so happened to be a Christian orphanage, whose agenda is to share the gospel, and in doing that also offering a safe haven. So she got to the orphanage when she was about 7 months pregnant. There they gave her shelter, they spoke the gospel truth over her. So my hope is that she ultimately had a seed planted. But she stayed, and on October 15th of 92, I came screaming into the world. And that is when my story started. So the very next day, the relinquishing letter was given, which means that she had signed away her rights to my life. Now, around the same time in the United States, there was an older couple. They already had 2 grown sons and a little girl they had previously adopted from India, and they really were not considering another adoption. So this was really not an option for them. By word of mouth, they heard about an agency and got in contact, a Christian agency, and they decided through many different avenues and just getting to know the director and his wife, why not just put in an application? Who knows what's going to happen with this? So they really prayed about it, sought counsel about it, and sent in the application. Unbeknownst to them, there were 7 little girls who they were trying to get out of India. And India at this time, India's always had issues with international adoption. And so at this time, once again, they were closing down the avenues for these children to be adopted. And so they had the final 7 that was the really big push for them to get out. My parents put in their application, and the director and his wife contacted them. They said, we have a couple little girls who do not have forever families. Would you please pray about considering to one more time make a way for potentially this to happen? So my parents felt like God wants us to do this, so let's do it. And so the agency started filing the paperwork. And about this time in India, what was happening is my birth mother was still with me, and rumor has it she heard word that there was a couple couples who were interested in these girls, and I was one of them. So really, whether or not her intentions were, she stuck around until she knew I was going to be pursued and potentially have a different shot at life. Because ultimately what could have happened was I would have aged out at the age of 16 from the orphanage, and then more than likely been sex trafficked. Whether it was from a brothel or with a madame or in a temple or just abused by people on the streets. So as soon as she knew, she was gone. Just like that. I'm sorry. So while this was all taking place, the agency my parents were working through got a couple files. And these files were of the girls who had yet to be matched. One was completely ready to go, just needed a forever family. The other one still had some paperwork on the international side of things, but she was still applicable. So they said, Jim and Jackie, go ahead and pray about it. We're going to give you the file without a name or a face, and you pray over which one you really feel is with your family. We've already pretty much matched you, but just pray about it. So they took some time, they prayed about it, the agency prayed about it, and they came back together and they said, you know, we really feel like this one is our match. Her name is Shabana, and this little girl has pretty much is our last applicant to get out of the country. Now, what most people don't know is that my parents have 3 children, Shane, Shonda, and Shannon. So the SH name that just so happened to be given to me by my birth mom really was just kind of an extra God saying, yes, this is yours. This is the one I have for you. Working with any country, it can take months, if not years, for it to go, and that just because you are matched with a child does not mean that you are going to end up with that child. So on India, they were getting the paperwork ready, and the judge came back and said, well, her birth mom didn't say who the father was. So like they normally do, they post your picture with some information into that region for anyone to come claim you or to come forward. That's also a way that many of those kids end up being sex trafficked too, because they don't have to show a lot of ID. So 6 months went by and no one came to claim her. So once again, everyone thought everything was fine. Well, then the judge came back again and said, well, we're still not going to let her out of the country because her birth mom had specified that she knew who the father was and just was refusing to tell us who he is. So once again, my parents contacted the agency and said, what needs to happen? What do we need to do to get this girl out? She is our daughter, she is our child. We will do pretty much anything. And the agency said, well, we're doing our best to find a loophole or something to get her out of here. Months went by, weeks went by, days went by, nothing. And finally the agency said, you know, we've got her. We finally have her. We talked to India, we dealt with the court system, and they said yes. Now all you have to do is find an escort. Now what they do is they don't let the parents go over. In the 90s that was not available. What they did was they had to choose one person, or the agency would choose for them, and they had to send that person to that country to pick up their children. The escorts went and they got to go see us in our orphanage and with our people and with our ayahs, who were our caretakers, who were our mothers before my mom came into place. So they got to see how well loved we were. They got to see the horrors of India and what happens to children who are used and exploited. And then on April 8th, 1994, St. Louis Airport was absolutely packed. That was the day that my life changed forever. That was the day that my destiny was completely different. That was really the day that we got to hold the banner up and say, these 7 girls, they're one less out of hundreds of thousands of children all over the world. We gotta be one less. And it was really the day that would forever reroute everything I could be. I was given the chance to not be used and abused and exploited. I was given a family that would foster love, and they would foster all the things about me that had yet to be discovered. And really through adoption, I got a great mom, but I also got a dad. And I got a really positive male role model in my life who wasn't gonna abuse me or use me or throw me away like I was a Kleenex, but who was gonna love me and cherish me. He is the one that I call Dad. And it's not just when the adopted child stands up, it's when the birth mother stands up, it's when the foster child stands up, it's when the failed abortion stands up, it's when the abused and the exploited stand up. And when we stand together, that is the change. Adoption is not just my story, adoption is also my life, and it gives me a future.